Well, good morning, everybody. We are in our fourth installment, I believe, of Lunch and Learn. We are the CfPA, the Crowdfunding Professionals Association, the trade group to the new and still growing crowdfunding community. And we have a very special guest with us today that I'll get into in just a few moments. As an introduction, again, the Crowdfunding Professionals Association is a trade group, a nonprofit trade group that was founded as a result of crowdfunding and the Jobs Act of 2012. And we have been somewhat quietly advocating for this new industry, both from entrepreneurs and small businesses, what the investment community calls issuers, and on the other side, which are investors. And a lot of investors in this space have been left out of the discussion and the opportunities of early stage equity and securities investment due to the nature of regulations that have been a bit dated. And so the guest joining us today is Jenny Kassan, who has been a lawyer in her life. She is a lawyer, and she's been working on investment crowdfunding since 2006, including sitting on the Securities and Exchange Commission Advisory Committee for small business and emerging companies. Obviously, that is at the base. If you listen to the politicians, that's what it all is about: small businesses and creating jobs. So Jenny has a lot of experience to share in this particular subject. Jenny wrote the actual petition that led to the Jobs Act itself in 2012. So as far as the CfPA goes, we are in a growth stage. As I mentioned before, we've been somewhat in the back channels of Washington, helping guide and give ideas to legislators and regulators as to ways that make this new industry more effective and to its purpose, which is to bring more people into the opportunities of investing in small companies, and also for small companies and entrepreneurs to find the capital that they need to grow their ideas into real companies and create jobs. The purpose of this series, Lunch and Learn, is to bring our members of leadership, of which the CfPA has over 40, distinguished members of both investment, legal, regulatory community, small business owners, platform operators, et cetera. We're hoping to bring our leadership and the mind share closer to the community through these types of events, which are far more personal and in a very direct way. And in a direct way, which leads to our last request before I turn it over to Jenny, which is please use your Q&A button in the app, in the Zoom app, to post any questions you have that you'd like Jenny to answer or myself during the course of this discussion. And with that, I turn over the mic to Jenny. Welcome. Our newest member to the Board of Directors, Jenny Kassan.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see my slides. All right. Did that work?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Great. So I'm going to go pretty fast through my presentation so we have plenty of time for Q&A. And what I thought it might be helpful to talk about today is the Form C, which is the federal form that needs to be filed if you are going to raise money under regulation crowdfunding, also known as Title III of the Jobs Act. I've been helping quite a lot of people raise money under Title III, and we've learned a lot about the Form C is it looks a little simpler than it is. So we're going to share some of the top mistakes we see and how you can try to avoid those. So I just want to quickly mention a little bit about my background. So back in 2006, I actually started working on investment crowdfunding. We didn't have the Jobs Act back then, but there were some ways that you could do it under the law at that time. And I helped quite a few clients raise money using investment crowdfunding through state level registrations. We actually called it direct public offerings back then. And we even raised money ourselves, the firm I worked at, and we used some of the money we raised to make this really cool video. And this is an image from the video that shows what it means to raise money from the crowd. But back in 2009, I got together with a colleague named Janelle Orsi, and we created a nonprofit called Sustainable Economies Law Center. And the first summer that we had summer interns, we decided to write a letter to the Securities and Exchange Commission to request that they make it legal for entrepreneurs and businesses to raise money from the public and to not have to do any complicated filings and not deal with any regulatory hurdles as long as no one was investing more than $100. So if you look at this slide, you can see the web page of the Securities and Exchange Commission, and you'll see the petition that was submitted, request for rulemaking to exempt securities offerings up to $100, submitted by Jenny Kassan. So I did that back in 2010. And amazingly enough, that idea started to gain a lot of traction. And so it did result in the passage of the Jobs Act in 2012. That's the back of my head watching President Obama sign the Jobs Act. So that was amazing. I'm really proud to have been part of that experience. And then one of the first things I did so as we all know, it took 4 years for Title III to finally go into effect. But one of the very first things I did when it did go into effect was get together with some colleagues to raise money under Title III. We raised money on WeFunder. We raised over $400,000 for something called the Force for Good Fund, which is an investment fund for extremely socially responsible businesses. So we actually ended up raising 1.1 million by combining Title III with Rule 506C. So that money has all been deployed now, and it's actually going really well. So I've not only helped many clients raise money under Title III, I've also done it myself. So I just want to mention something really quickly before we get into the Form C, and this is kind of a mistake I see that a lot of entrepreneurs make when they're raising money under Title III of the Jobs Act, or really anytime you're raising money using whatever tool you're using, is a lot of entrepreneurs take and use an off-the-shelf instrument to offer to investors. So they'll grab like maybe they'll grab a safe off of the website of Y Combinator, and they'll say, this is what we're offering to investors. Or they'll grab a crowd safe off of the website of Republic, and they'll just use that. And I just really want to caution you, when you are raising money, no matter how you're doing it, to really think carefully about exactly what you're offering to investors and choose your offering wisely, because I've seen people raise money and then end up in a really bad situation where their goals for their business are not in alignment with what their investors are expecting. And there's so many different kinds of offerings you can make to investors. I could do a whole 2-hour webinar. In fact, I'm doing that tomorrow on all the different things you can offer to investors. So just really take the time to design your offering to fit your goals and your values and your plans and what's possible for your business. So yeah, you just want to make sure that whatever you're offering to your investors aligns your goals and values with those of your investors, and also that it's doable. You don't want to overpromise. You want to offer something that you can actually deliver. So I'm not going to get into that anymore, but I definitely love talking to people about that topic, because I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see entrepreneurs make. Okay, so, and then I just want to say a couple words about what's happening with Title III. So it's now been around for over 3 years, and there's a website called investibule.co, and it's a great website. You can check out a lot of cool offerings there, and they've also done some research on who's actually getting funded with Title III. And it's very exciting to see, according to their latest data, women-owned companies and people of color-owned companies are actually doing better on average than the average person who's raising on these platforms. So it's very promising, because as you probably know, when you raise money from certain other sources of funding, women and people of color don't do so well, unfortunately, and that's a lot of sources of funding. So I just wanted to share that. I also wanted to quickly mention that when the Jobs Act was almost getting ready to go into effect, or I'm sorry, even a little bit later than that, I met someone who was starting her own investment crowdfunding platform under Title III, and her name's Michelle Timish, and it's called Crowdfund Main Street. And I was so excited about her mission and her vision about what she wants to use regulation crowdfunding for, that I became a co-founder. I'm a shareholder in the company. And a lot of my clients have used this platform to raise money. So I just wanted to show you some of my amazing clients that have raised money under Title III on Crowdfund Main Street. Absynthia, who sells absinthe. Molly Madden, who's a wine importer, Kai Norte, who sells delicious coconut ice cream, and Lynn Johnson, who has a girls after school program and camp. So it just goes to show the diversity of the kinds of businesses that can raise money successfully under the Jobs Act of Title III. Okay, so now I want to get into the advice I have about Form C. So what is Form C? So it's a fillable form that you have to file with this thing called EDGAR, which is basically the system that the SEC uses to track all its filings. You also have to provide the form to potential investors, and it's available on your campaign page when you're raising money. The Form C requires a lot of information. I'm not going to go through this whole list, but you can look at the list. We actually have a checklist we can share with you. I'll tell you how you can get that later. But it's quite a lot of information that you are required to provide. The SEC, in its releasing the document it created when it released the regulations under Title III of the Jobs Act, they estimate it takes 60 hours to complete the Form C. And they estimate that it costs $2,500 to $20,000 to pay professionals to help you prepare it. I see a flashing light, I see a chat. Okay, cool, awesome. We have lots of people watching, sorry. Okay, so one thing I noticed, like when I was raising money on WeFunder, a lot of platforms do this where they say, oh, don't worry about your Form C, just answer these few questions on our questionnaire and we'll complete the Form C for you. And looking back, I did that, and looking back, the Form C we prepared was not great. It really, honestly, it's a very serious document that if you do it right, it protects you from future liability. It ensures that your investors know what they're getting into. So I would not recommend that you just leave your Form C up to the intermediary platform as part of the services they provide. It's way more complicated than they want to make it seem, and you are exposing yourself to potential liability if you don't really do it right. So I would go ahead and take that seriously, the 60 hours and the $2,500 to $20,000, and really do it right. In the long run, it's going to make your life so much easier, especially if you raise future rounds. Because if you show a Form C that isn't well prepared and isn't complete to future investors, they might ask you to do a rescission offer. There's all kinds of things that could go wrong. Not to mention you could be sued by your investors if things don't go well. So please take your Form C seriously. All right, so top mistakes we see. So we see a lot of mistakes, but I'm just gonna give you 3 top ones that we see. So one is there's some confusion about what's required in terms of financials. As you probably have heard, there are reviewed financials required, and reviewed financials have to be prepared by an independent CPA. They're pretty serious. They cost at least $2,000. We've had clients pay. We have a CPA we work with who charges $2,000, but we've known people have paid as much as $10,000 for reviewed financials. And so some people say, oh, I really don't want to have to deal with that, so I'm only going to raise 107,000, because if you only raise 107,000, you don't have to have reviewed financials. But the problem is that even if you're raising 107,000 or less, you still have to have GAAP compliant financials. Oops, this is a really wordy slide, so I'm not going to go into it, but it basically, and I know Devin is going to share a way that you can get a copy of these slides if you want to see the details, but basically, even if you're only raising 107,000, you still need professionally prepared financials that have to be in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles. So even that can cost a few $1,000s to prepare. So just be aware of that and make sure it takes time. So make sure you give yourself enough time to get those completed. Number two, the related party transactions question. When I first read it, I thought I understood it, but then I had a client ask me to explain it, and I realized it's really confusing. And I think a lot of people fail to disclose related party transactions because the way it's written, it's kind of hard to understand. So my colleagues and I went through it really carefully, and we put together a step-by-step process you can use to make sure you answer that question correctly. Again, I'm not going to go through it, but it is here on the slide. But basically, any financial transaction that you do, and that's any financial transaction. It could be an investment, it could be an employment agreement, it could be an independent contractor agreement, it could be a vendor agreement. You have to disclose any related party transactions. And that issue is in the news a lot right now because of what happened with WeWork. They had a lot of related party transactions. Hopefully you don't have those, but like anything like that. But you may have some and you may not realize it. We've had clients that had them and didn't really realize it until we really talked them through this step-by-step process. So for each transaction, this is what you have to disclose for related party transactions. Number three, this isn't super obvious if you just read the Form C, but there is actually a requirement that when you file the Form C, so the Form C itself is quite short, but you have to add a lot of attachments to respond to all the requirements under the regulations. And one of the things you do have to attach is the contents of your campaign page. So that's everything you put up on your campaign page. Even if there's a video, you have to have a video transcript. So you want to really make sure that you have all of that stuff prepared. And so I just want to give you an example of a couple of two examples of one way that you should do it, one way that you shouldn't do it. So, and of course, the very first one was prepared by Jamie Frank, who works at my firm and is my Form C expert. She does a beautiful job. So she labels each attachment with the name of the attachment and what is in it. And she names the documents accordingly so that it's clear what each document is. If you look at your typical Form C filing on a website, on a campaign, on an intermediary page like WeFunder, for example, you'll see something more like the bottom one where there's no description of the documents. The documents are just called document 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's really not a good practice. You want to make sure that it's really easy for your investors to see all the attachments, to know what they are. And again, you want to make sure and include all the contents of your campaign page. The exhibits can be PDFs, and again, you should include the video transcript. Also, a lot of people forget about your filings that you have to do after you raise money. So you are required to file an annual report. I believe it's within 4 months after the end of the fiscal year in which you raise money. And assuming that you are eligible to stop reporting after the first year, which most companies are, we can talk about what it takes to be able to stop reporting after just 1 year. You also have to file a Form C-TR, which is reporting that you no longer have to file annual reports. So some people get so excited when they raise money, they forget to do this. So I just want to mention that I have created a website, a really simple website called formchelp.com. And if you go to that website, you can sign up to get our checklist that gives you all the details you need to know to be able to properly prepare the Form C. And, you know, we can also we'll also be sending out other resources related to Title III of the Jobs Act. And I think that's it.
Jenny,
Yep.
can you tell us that URL one more time?
Yes, it's formchelp.com.
That is helpful.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing.
Well, that was very helpful. Thank you, Jenny, for imparting on us some of the wisdoms from someone who's been in this game. I would say in the game longer, but you've actually helped create the game. So thank you so much for your contribution. It's really nice to finally have met you, at least virtually in person. And I'm sure we're going to have some more conversations in the coming months with board meetings and otherwise. So thanks again. Any questions from the audience? Devin?
Yeah, people have asked how they might be able to see this at a replay. And Scott, maybe you can cover that.
Happy to. So you will find a reference to this discussion in a slider on the front page of CfPA.com or .org. Sorry, that's our web address. You can also find us at crowdfundingprofessionalassociation.com if you feel like typing. Otherwise, CfPA.org is good to go. And that link will tell a little bit about today's event. And then in a day or so, once we have the video compiled and edited, we'll post that. And you will find all the other Lunch and Learn and other video series that we've done in the past 7 years on our website in the video archive section as well. If you just navigate the header, the nav menu on the website, you'll find links to all kinds of resources and useful information. So that's that. Anything else, Devin?
Another question came up about, Jenny, you talked about the simplicity of the form, and the form does look simple. What are the big trips that trip people up?
Well, I mean, the form, it's a little confusing because the form itself doesn't actually include everything that you're required to provide. To see the list of everything you're required to provide, you have to actually look at the regs. And so that's why we created the Form C checklist that we are going to be providing to people who sign up on formchelp.com. But yeah, the form is, it doesn't really give you the list of everything you need to provide. So it's very easy to submit the form without actually providing the required information. And one of the things we love about the Title III of the Jobs Act is because before Title III of the Jobs Act, if you were doing a public offering, you had to go back and forth with the regulators, and it could take 5 to 6 months until they would approve your disclosure materials. Under Title III of the Jobs Act, it's not true. You just submit the form and boom, you can start talking about your offering. No one reviews it. And we love that, but there is a downside to that because there's no one checking to make sure you did it right. So unfortunately, there's a lot of people submitting these Form Cs, especially when they rely on the crowdfunding intermediary, the portal, to do the Form C for them. And they're just not correct. They're not complete. And, you don't think it's an issue because, yeah, you can go ahead and raise money, no problem. You get your check, whatever. But down the road, you're setting yourself up for potential liability, for having to do a rescission offer, for having future investors not wanting to invest because you've created all these potential liabilities. So that's the bad thing about the Form C is it's pretty tricky to prepare and provide all that stuff, and you wouldn't know it. There's no way to know if you don't do it right.
That's a good one. I have a couple of questions as well, Devin. So again, to anyone who's listening and didn't catch that last one, as far as checklists go, checklists are one of the saving graces. Even in my first forays into crowdfunding campaigns, I found checklists were very hard to find, very inconsistent, but always useful because ultimately you're going to see a bunch of them. You're going to kind of compile your best of and follow those rules. So checklists are great. So formchelp.com, Jenny, is an awesome resource, and thank you for making that. I'm sure people are going to be clicking it as we finish this call. Do you have any thoughts on other tools of the trade that could be of use and things that the CfPA perhaps could help create in order to ease people's transition to these new waters?
Yeah, well, I do have on my website, jennykassan.com, I do have a lot of resources available if you really want to dive into the whole question of fundraising, even beyond Title III of the Jobs Act. So definitely check out jennykassan.com for resources there, get on our mailing list. Also, I do have a question for people who are watching, if they're willing to respond. I would just love to hear people's biggest pain points in terms of raising money in general and or raising money under regulation crowdfunding?
Yeah, I think as far as surveys go, I know that that's an area that we're intending to move very quickly into with the reformation of, or the new addition to the Education and Training Committee. So you know, and I don't know how much you've even had a chance to dive in, the CfPA currently has 5 committees and divisions, one of which is the Education and Training Committee, which is where I actually got my start at the CfPA, serving on that committee, and was co-chair with a gentleman named Ryan Feit, who has gone on since to form a company called Seed Invest, which was merged with a rather large player in the field and now has quite a dominant position in that space. So we have some success in our board to talk about there as well. But on the education and training side, the next phase is going to be, again, more about outreach. So a number of our committees will be kind of merging operations, even for a temporary term, in surveys. We actually had a young student from Holland reach out to us after he had concluded through his research that the leadership at CfPA was some of the most informed minds in the world on the subject. And he asked us all, he asked me if I could get the board and other leadership members to participate in this survey. And so we're looking forward to the results of that, and we'll post those results shortly. It's more of a future peering. What's the world of crowdfunding going to look like in the next year, 2 years type of thing. But I think it'll give us some interesting conclusions. So we'll see how that goes. Any questions come in, Devin?
No more questions.
Very good.
I think we are good to wrap this up. It's been great, Jenny.
Yeah, thank you again. So jennykassan.com, I'm sure you'll find other links from there. So Jenny, thank you again for your time today in wrapping up Lunch and Learn Volume 4.
Before everybody leaves there, I did add the link to the actual Form C on the SEC website to the, the chat. So you can grab that there. I also added the link to Jenny's slides there in the chat. And finally, the link to Jenny's Form C help website. So you can all grab that there before you hop off.
Perfect.
Thank you. And good to see you, Jamie, Frank, Charlotte, Michelle, other friends who joined. I look forward to hearing your feedback.
Great. Thanks again, Jenny.
Bye.
Thanks for setting it up, Devin.
Bye-bye, everybody.